Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. Thank you for joining us once again here on CPAC as we bring you special coverage this morning of the speech from the throne. Now, every throne speech embodies both the dignified and the efficient, the elements of a constitutional monarchy and a parliamentary democracy. But this year's opening of Parliament is certainly distinguished by the presence of the sovereign himself, as it will be King Charles, Canada's head of state, who will be the one to read the speech from the throne today, outlining the Carney government's priorities for Canada's 45th Parliament. Now, this is Charles's 20th visit to Canada, his first as king, and his arrival has been described by Rideau Hall as the King's Canadian homecoming. So, today's throne speech will contain elements that are rooted in both tradition and Canadian democratic practice, but will also, as we hear details from the speech itself, address the more practical matters of how this recently elected Carney government intends to move forward with a minority parliament. So much to discuss this morning, and joining me today is CPAC's Catherine Lafrance once again and Dalhousie University professor Laurie Turnbull. So good morning to both of you. But before we begin our discussion here at the desk, I do want to go right now to Canada's Senate, because that is where we will find CPAC's Andrew Thompson this morning. Andrew, hello.
Hi there, Michael.
So you are in the Senate right now, and that's where the throne speech will be read at around 11 a.m. Eastern time this morning. Talk to us about the preparations happening inside there at the Senate, but also what's happening outside, you know, as the King makes his way to the Red Chamber this morning.
Right, so there is actually a red carpet right behind me here on its way towards the Senate chamber, where the King will proceed very shortly. As you say, there are crowds outside as well as military troops, and you can hear behind me the bells ringing actually to formally summon senators into the chamber. But what I can tell you what's happening inside right now is that we've seen an array of dignitaries make their way towards the Senate chamber. Senators, members of Parliament, we've seen former Governor General Adrian Clarkson, for instance. We've seen premiers as well, including Manitoba's Wab Kinew. We've been told to expect about 500 people in the chamber for the speech, including Supreme Court justices and, of course, the Speaker of the House of Commons, who will lead that contingent shortly. Now, we are waiting for the King to arrive, and what we're going to see before he arrives in the chamber is a full military salute from 100 members of the Royal Canadian Regiment. There will be a 21-gun salute as well, and then the Royal Party, which includes the Prime Minister, will make their way here into the Senate chamber. They'll be greeted by Senate leadership, including the Senate Speaker. And then after a while, once everyone is situated and seated in the Senate chamber, that's when the formal part of today begins, with the usher of the black rod going to summon MPs.
Well, as you say, the formal element, and that is, of course, how these things unfold. The usher of the black rod going over to the House of Commons to summon, as you say, members of Parliament to the upper chamber to hear the speech from the throne. So a lot to be watching. Andrew, we'll speak again. Thank you for that. CPAC's Andrew Thompson at the Canadian Senate, where the speech will be read a little later this morning. And you know, from where Andrew is, and those who know Ottawa know very well that where the temporary Senate has been located, the former conference center, a picture of which you see behind me right now, right across the street is the National War Memorial. And let's take a quick look at that, because as we go through the programming today, I do want to note the fact that after the throne speech itself, while members of Parliament will make their way back to the House of Commons, where their day will begin because Parliament is then officially opened, but we will also be watching the situation here at the Cenotaph, because this is where King Charles and Queen Camilla will be paying their respects to Canadian War veterans and to the Canadian War dead, which essentially will be the last event for their Majesties as they wrap up their visit here in Canada and then head back to London to rest up after a very busy 24 hours, as we heard from Bonnie Brownlee yesterday, a royal advisor. It is no small feat for the monarch to adjust their schedule to make a trip such as this, but King Charles did agree to the invitation extended to him by the Prime Minister, and in a matter of weeks is here in Ottawa for this very quick 24-hour visit, reading the speech from the throne, which, you know, will contain many themes. And with that, I do want to bring in both Catherine Lafrance and Laurie Turnbull to this discussion, because, you know, I certainly have things in my mind that I'll be watching out for, not forgetting the fact that while this is Canadian tradition and how parliaments are opened in this country, there's also a political backdrop to this, and it is an international political backdrop vis-a-vis Canada and the United States. So with those in mind, Catherine, I'm wondering what you are watching out for in today's throne speech.
Essentiellement trois choses. Je vous dirais évidemment le contenu du discours du trône comme tel,
Well, three
écrit,
things.
pensé par
Basically, the
Mark Carney,
content
mais lu par
of
le
the
roi. Alors
throne
ça, ce n'est
speech
pas
is
rien.
written by
C'est
Mark
extrêmement
Carney and read by the king, and that is quite something. It's very rare. So, of course, we will be looking at the content because it sets out what the government intends to do in the coming weeks and months. That's particularly important since we're in the midst of a trade war with the U.S. But we'll also be looking at how the king reads it, and sometimes he might slip something in, a word here, an allusion there. This is not necessarily expected. There won't be any major surprises, but we never know. He might also say something just before a word or a sentence. We'll also see who will be attending. We know that members of the Bloc Québécois will not attend. So who attends or who does not attend is thereby making a statement, so we'll be watching.
Laurie, when you think of what is about to unfold this morning, what are you keeping an eye out for?
Okay, so I think first, just the sense of occasion. There is no sense of occasion, I think, like a speech from the throne and the king reading it and all that goes along with opening a new parliament. I think this is going to be, you know, I'm big parliament supporter, so I'm pretty excited about all of that. But apart from that, I think in terms of the speech itself, I think three things. One is a sense of, do we get any more meat on the bones in terms of Carney's agenda, where he's going to start? Will we get any more in terms of a legislative plan, maybe for the year or for the term? That might be a little bit more detailed than we're going to get, but I'm just sort of interesting to see if we can see any of that fleshed out. Also, how much we will hear about the specifics of the time. And so, for example, the throne speech during COVID-19 was very much referencing the overall context of being in a pandemic and what that did to the legislative agenda, what kind of position the government was in, what Canadians were facing. There was a lot of talk about that. So given the circumstances now, I wonder if there will be a bit of a backdrop set around, the Trump situation, the economy, the affordability crisis, housing, like what sorts of stage will be set. And then third, anything that seems to be really unique to the fact that the king is giving this speech and not the governor general. So anything he might have put in there, anything that really speaks to the fact that he is here to read this speech in a very important time. What his own reflections on being in Canada, just something in there that makes it his own.
Yeah, well, I will note the fact that I wonder if this is the Carney effect, because you chose three things. You chose three things, Mark Carney, at all times. Yeah. It was always choosing the three things. But I will say, and in terms of what I'm watching out for, both echoing what you are both saying, first and foremost, the issue of sovereignty. Mm-hmm. Because the Prime Minister did invite the King to read the throne speech, to come to Canada, in part as a response to the challenge of Canadian sovereignty that has been issued by President Donald Trump. So how sovereignty figures into that speech. And bearing in mind, the King will be reading that speech, but the vast majority of it, if not all of it, we'll see if any parts are added, but the vast majority of it is written by this government. So how they address sovereignty in this speech, I think, is first and foremost, because that is exactly why King Charles is here to assert Canada's history, its own democratic traditions, which, as we noted yesterday, is rooted not in a republic system, but in a system of constitutional monarchy. So I will be looking rather for comments around sovereignty. I will be looking for as well the government's agenda. We know that Mark Carney has talked about warp speed. We know that he has already told the members of his caucus to expect a very, very busy June, because at this point the parliamentary calendar will take us to June 20th before they rise for summer. So he promised to accomplish a lot in a short amount of time. I look to see how that might be reflected in the speech, bearing in mind that a lot of the national consensus around things like projects of national importance as they've been described, that type of sentiment and that type of unanimity around an issue could disappear by the end of the summer. So to see how that might be reflected in the speech, I certainly will be looking for that as well. And also a little bit of the reaction from the Prime Minister, because yesterday there was no denying he was incredibly happy to be having this moment. You know, it went off without a hitch, it seemed, from the moment that the king arrived, very well orchestrated, immediately greeted by leadership in this country, both political, representational, and the vice-regal, but also with Indigenous leadership, the hundreds, if not thousands, of people that showed up at Lansdowne and also at Rideau Hall. You know, Laurie, maybe I think that's worthwhile, because I will be watching for how the Prime Minister reacts to today. But from what you've been hearing, how happy were Canadian organizers with how the first part of this 24-hour visit unrolled yesterday?
I think it was pretty well flawless. I think it went off without a hitch. I mean, too bad about the little bit of rain at Rideau Hall, but apart from that, it just seemed like from the moment they got off the plane, everything seemed to go just swimmingly. The travel, the reception at Lansdowne seems fantastic. It seemed like it was a really warm, enthusiastic crowd. The King and the Queen moved about, no problem. They managed to interact and have some chats with people. I don't think there was a happier person in the country than Mark Carney. My goodness, he was just, he was bursting. He was so happy. He looked like a little kid on Christmas. I can only imagine how happy he's going to be today.
Yeah, happy as we start to see the motorcades make their way to the Senate right now. And just to situate people at home, this is the view from in front of the Senate, at least the building that serves as the Senate until the renovations are completed of Centre Block on Parliament Hill. But this is, as you can see, the Parliament Hill in the background, just down the road, and you see the Prime Minister coming out. Let's take a quick listen as to how this is unfolding. So that is the Prime Minister as he takes his position, and along Wellington Street, the road in front of the Prime Minister, that is where the landau carrying King Charles will essentially stop to allow the King and the Queen to make their way into the Senate. Let's take a listen to the salute. And with the playing of the national anthem, as we take a look once again at the Prime Minister in front of the Senate, we want to note the fact that we will be watching the speech from the throne, but we'll watch it unfold in about a minute's time inside the House of Commons itself, because outside here in Ottawa by the Senate building and along Wellington Street, that again there will be the landau carrying the King and Queen to the Senate to prepare them for the speech from the throne. But of course it also means that a process begins which includes the usher of the black rod summoning members of Parliament to the Senate, which is just down the road, so that they can hear the speech from the throne. So there will be much ceremony that unfolds, and of course because we follow the House of Commons Commons very closely here at CPAC. Once the House is ready in session to await the summons to the Senate, we'll have that for you here. But until then, we'll continue our discussions as we continue to cover this important event. So the Prime Minister now in, and we're expecting the King in about 15 minutes' time, because the landau that will carry the King will leave the area, the staging area just in front of the Bank of Canada, again further down Wellington, making his way down, officially walking into the Senate in about 15 minutes' time. So, you know, Laurie, I'm going to get you to walk us through a bit more of the procession, if you will, because this is very much rooted in history, where you have the Usher of the Black Rod, essentially summoning members of Parliament to the Senate, underlining the fact that in our democratic tradition, there is a clear separation between the lower and upper chamber.
Absolutely. And so this is one of those days that all eyes are focused on what's happening in the Senate, where you see the beautiful the red carpet. Typically, we see more of the focus on the House of Commons, which is where the elected members are, where they debate legislation. And of course, the same type of procedures happen in the Senate, but
this is inside the Senate chamber that you see on the screen right now, a live shot.
Exactly. And so the RCMP is the first, and then Greg Peters is the Usher of the Black Rod. And so he is the one who is going to lead the procession. He's the one who goes and, you know, knocks on the door and summons, and then kind of starts everything. And so the King's landau, I think, will come from around the Bank of Canada, which is kind of a couple of blocks away, and then we'll come up and then get him there to the Senate, which of course is a sort of temporary makeshift Senate while the real one is under construction.
And this is a very interesting aspect, and it's been for the last few speeches from the throne, because historically, because the center block has housed both the House of Commons, which is essentially on the east side of the center block. It's also housed the upper chamber, the red chamber, the Senate on the west side, flip those around. The Commons on the west side of center block, and the Senate on the east side of center block. And historically, to call members of Parliament over to the Red Chamber was something as simple as walking over and knocking on the door, calling them, and they cross the hall. Not so in this case, as they will have to make their way down the road, as evidenced a little bit by what we're seeing here. The officials making their way right behind the RCMP musical ride to the upper chamber, Laurie.
And it makes for a more elaborate ceremony, given the distance they have to cross. And it ends up being quite fitting, in the sense that it gives the public an opportunity to see the King make this trek to the Senate, you know, and have this moment outside where you can see all the horses. And this is a really kind of interesting moment to celebrate the King's attendance. Yeah,
absolutely. And of course, that is a part of Canadian democratic tradition, this parliamentary democracy, this constitutional monarchy, in which our traditions are very much steeped in this type of ceremony. And Catherine, it's been very interesting to see the number of people that have showed up to witness this in Ottawa. But as I say that, I'm going to cut off, because as you can see, the Speaker is now seated in the House of Commons. We bring you to the House of Commons, but do stay with us. Full coverage of the throne speech and the ceremony coming up.
Has been received as follows. Mr. Speaker, I have the honour to inform you that His Majesty the King will arrive at the Senate of Canada building at 10:15 a.m. on Tuesday, the 27th day of May, 2025. When it will be indicated that all is in readiness, His Majesty the King will proceed to the chamber of the Senate to formally open the first session of the 45th Parliament of Canada. Sincerely yours, Donald C. Booth, Canadian Secretary to the King.
I have the honour to inform the House that communication is as follows, has been received. Mr. Speaker, I have the honour to inform you that His Majesty the King will arrive at the Senate Building of Canada at 10:15 on May 25th, 2025. When it has been confirmed that everything is in place, His Majesty the King will go to the Senate chamber to officially open the first session of the 45th Parliament of Canada. Please accept my highest consideration, Donald C. Booth, Canadian Secretary to the King.
Enjoy your visit. Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for coming. Hey. Hey, how you doing there? Good to see you.
seated. Veuillez vous asseoir.
Usher of the Black Rod, you will proceed to the House of Commons and acquaint the House that it is the pleasure of His Majesty the King that they attend him immediately in the Senate chamber. Huissier du bâton noir, rendez-vous à la Chambre des communes et informez-la que c'est le plaisir de Sa Majesté le Roi que les communes se rendent immédiatement auprès de lui dans la salle du Sénat.
And with that, the usher, the black rod, calls members of Parliament to attend to the King at the Senate, the Red Chamber, and they are now leaving the House of Commons, making their way down Wellington Street here in Ottawa to the former conference building where the Senate has now been set up and where the King awaits. And to that, let's take a look at the Red Chamber itself. As you see there, His Majesty King Charles greeting the many dignitaries there, among them the justices of the Supreme Court. And you see behind him former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, his mother Margaret Trudeau, Mila Mulrooney just over to the right, and right beside former Prime Minister Trudeau, former Prime Minister Harper, also there, former Prime Minister Kim Campbell, and also former Governors General. So quite the gathering in the Red Chamber as they await the arrival of MPs for the reading of the throne speech. And as we continue to look at this image, I'm going to bring in two more people to the discussion. Of course, Laurie Turnbull and Catherine Lafrance joined us earlier this morning. Geneviève Tellier from the Université d'Ottawa is here now as well as Rob Russo, who is with The Economist, former parliamentary bureau chief with both the CBC and the Canadian Press. So, without a doubt, and we touched upon this earlier, the invitation of the Prime Minister to the King to come here to read the throne speech, very much rooted in asserting Canadian sovereignty, Canadian tradition. And you cannot ignore the fact, Rob, with the gathering all those former prime ministers and governors generals and the justices of the Supreme Court, plus the King of Canada, it makes a grand showing of the history and the traditions of this country that were questioned by the U.S. president.
Yes, I think the reason he's here is not just to show people who we are. I think it is aimed at showing Canadians who we are and how we're governed. It's also to show somebody in the United States who's in the White House who we are not. We are not a republic. We are a constitutional monarchy. We have a distant head of state who lives overseas. I would have loved to have been a fly on one of those desks listening to the conversations between bitter political rivals like Justin Trudeau and Stephen Harper and Kim Campbell, who normally would not have a good word to say about the other, and there they are getting along, smiling, getting along quite well. It is unique. But the sovereign's presence here is also meant to show people inside of Canada and outside of people who we are and who we are not.
Geneviève, it certainly is a moment of Canadian inflection, if you will, for the world to see, as Rob is pointing out.
Oui, effectivement, si on veut connaître c'est quoi le Canada, qui sont les personnes importantes au Canada.
Yes, if we want to see who's important in Canada, all we need to do is look at the screen. Those who are absent probably couldn't make it. This is really a strong moment of this visit, a showing of Canadian unity and the importance of the moment, the importance of Canadian institution, and all that is thanks to our Prime Minister, Mark Carney, and he did the right thing in inviting the King. And to see the King, who is really part of the scene. This is the image that the government wanted to give, that the King is at home here in Canada, and this is a sovereignty.
That there have been many elements of this ceremony in the Red Chamber, and we've been focused here on what's been happening in the House of Commons, but as the royal procession made their way into the Red Chamber, there was an Indigenous greeting from First Nations, there was a Métis fiddler that played, there were traditions of the Inuit people, underlining, not just I guess the historical British and French ties of this country, roots of this country, but also the Indigenous roots of this country. And you were remarking about that, Catherine, when we were not on air, but just the diversity and how that's a marked difference from what we often see in the United States.
Tellement. Ce qui saute aux yeux depuis hier dans toute cette organisation.
Absolutely. What's been so clear ever since the beginning of the planning and the ceremony is class. And I'm not just talking about the King and Queen, but everybody. And class, dignity, decorum. And when we listen to the kinds of things President Trump is saying these days, we can feel the enormous difference. And it's very important to portray us this way to the United States and to the world at large.
to ourselves. I think that's very important in this moment because I think the country has been looking for a way to express its nationalism ever since the threat was issued by Donald Trump late last year with the call on the 51st state. You know, Laurie, when you look at this procession, the ceremony, all the traditions that unfold, and I know you are a big fan of the traditions and conventions that govern this country, what comes to mind to you?
Well, I mean, I think a few things. One thing is that, and this is another thing we were sort of saying as not on air, but there are so many people in this room who typically don't get along very well. I guess Rob, you kind of did say that on air, right? There's people in this room who spend a lot of time kind of swiping at one another. They're used to that. They have different opinions on things. There's a lot of personal differences between Canadian politicians, and we're used to that. But when the sovereign is there and they're all gathered to hear, you know, what the plan is, and they're respectful, and there is a sense that as much as there's politics going on here, we can rise above that. We can have a moment where this is about the country, this is about sovereignty, this is about all of us having a common interest in what's best for Canada. And so we can actually park some of that nonsense that's so frustrating sometimes, and they all can, you know, sit there and get along and behave. And so it's really nice. And I think it's important for Canadians to see that, because sometimes we look at these chambers and all it is swiping and nonsense and video clips that they're going to repackage and sell to their funders, and it's just annoying. But this is actually very lovely.
Yeah, well, you know, it is this moment of cooperation, this moment of unity, this moment of Canadianism. Yes, Rob.
Michael, if I can say, just to follow up on something that Laurie said, we're in the middle of the hockey playoff season. We watch Canadian hockey players pull the sweaters over the heads of each other and bash each other's brains out on the ice, and then at the end of it all, they shake hands and they hug each other. That's the equivalent of what we're seeing on the Senate floor among some of these rivals. I also want to mark the sense of occasion. This is a rarity. It hasn't happened since 1977, when Charles' mother addressed or delivered the speech from the throne. And what was going on then? It was another moment of perilous times in terms of our national unity. The Parti Québécois had just been elected the fall before, René Lévesque and the Parti Québécois. And they were threatening to break up the country, have a referendum, break up the country. There is a threat to our national unity now. And so in times of peril to our national unity, we roll out the sovereign. There's a lot of argument and conjecture about whether or not we should remain a constitutional monarchy, but this is the second time in the last 50 years where we've rolled out the monarchy as a symbol of our unity to try and bring us together.
Symbol of unity, but you know, I think also arguably continuity, right? Yeah. Because we were, you think of King Charles. Well, this is his 20th visit to Canada. His first as the king, but his 20th visit to Canada is showing deep ties that goes across generations of people here. And when you think about the number of prime ministers we have had in 20 years, the continuity, the through line here is King Charles, and before him, Queen Elizabeth, who made her first visit back in the 1950s. So this through line of generations and prime ministers, you know, we were talking about the past speeches, and there was, for example, like 1957 was the first time the Queen delivered the speech from the throne, the late Queen Elizabeth, and she was invited by Louis Saint Laurent, and he thought he would win the election, but in fact Diefenbaker won the election. So it was Diefenbaker up there, and wouldn't it have been wonderful to sit beside Louis Saint Laurent and say, so how do you feel now? You know, because it was not he that was sitting beside the Queen, but it is that continuity that the monarchy, the Canadian monarch, has played a role in, Geneviève.
Et c'est peut-être l'atout de la monarchie, je veux dire, parce qu'on conteste beaucoup en ce moment.
And that is the
quand même des questions qui se posent.
Asset that the monarchy has. There are a lot of debates, especially in Quebec, some regions more than others, but you know, if we don't have this, we'd have to find another way. I do like your notion of continuity, because we have governors general, but they're there for 5 years. Sometimes they serve 5 years twice, but the monarchy is there for the long-term continuity and stability. What better way to ensure stability than to have somebody who's there for life? And that's what monarchs and the succession present. Of course, they have to behave and take their role seriously. Queen Elizabeth absolutely did that, and that's why she was so deeply loved. She cared so deeply about her duty And Charles will not be there as long, but he seems to take it just as seriously. And that really is the biggest asset of the monarchy. It may also be a way of avoiding some deviations. This may be what we are. But think about the disgraceful scenes we've seen in the White House when Volodymyr Zelensky was visiting Washington, when the president of South Africa was visiting Washington. Just remember the tone of both those ambushes, because that's what they were. We don't have that here. Yes, parliamentarians debate, like hockey players sometimes fight pretty hard, but that is part of the process. And it's also part of the process. It's quite natural to question the monarchy. But nonetheless, it remains that for all the reasons we've cited, so far in Canada, we've avoided the kind of going off the rails that we're seeing in the U.S. and everything else that we're seeing in the South.
On what makes an efficient parliamentary government, the dignified and the efficient, and the crown signifying the dignified, the political, the governance is the efficient. And in this case, when you roll out examples like what happened with President Zelensky at the White House and the South African president at the White House, it's hard to use the word dignified. And yet, in this instance, we see the embodiment of the dignified in the opening of the Canadian Parliament. And this is a bit of editorialization on my part, admittedly, but I think that's something that Canadians can be very proud of, that this is how our democracy has worked and has continued to work despite challenges. You mentioned the challenge of the 70s, the first referendum in 1980, and we will continue to have challenges as a country, but it is a testament to the durability of this country that the dignified and the efficient has brought us to this point where we still exist and have a distinct place in the world. So, and that is a rant on my part. I apologize.
That's a good rant.
I'll give you another example of how it symbolizes what the country is all about. Canadians, particularly Francophone Canadians, a lot of them younger, are going to hear a king who speaks a very elegant French. And it's going to surprise them, probably, that somebody who represents London speaks a more elegant French and a more evolved French than our own Prime Minister. So that's an example of how the monarchy has also served Canada as well.
Well, and with that, Rob, let's go back to the Red Chamber. The usher, the Black Rod, has returned. Let's take a listen.
Order! An order!
May it please your Majesty, the House of Commons has elected me their Speaker, though I am but little able to fulfill the important duties thus assigned to me. If in the performance of those duties I should at any time fall into error, I pray that the fault may be imputed to me and not to the House of Commons, whose servant I am, and who, through me, the better to enable them to discharge their duty to their king and country, humbly claim all their undoubted rights and privileges, especially that they may have freedom of speech in their debates, access to your Majesty's person at all seasonable times, and that their proceedings may receive from your Majesty the most favorable construction.
May it please your Majesty, the House of Commons has elected me their Speaker, though I am but little able to fulfill the important duties thus assigned to me. If, in the performance of those duties, I should at any time fall into error, I pray that the fault may be imputed to me and not to the Commons, whose servant I am, and who, through me, the better to enable them to discharge their duty to their king and country, humbly claim all their undoubted rights and privileges, especially that they may have freedom of speech in their debates, access to your Majesty's person at all seasonable times, and that their proceedings may receive from your Majesty the most favorable construction.
Mr. Speaker, I am commanded by His Majesty the King to declare to you that he freely confides in the duty and attachment of the House of Commons to His Majesty's person and government, and not doubting that their proceedings will be conducted with wisdom, temper, and prudence, he grants and upon all occasions will recognize and allow their constitutional privileges. I am commanded also to assure you that the Commons shall have ready access to His Majesty upon all seasonable occasions, and that their proceedings, as well as your words and actions, will constantly receive from him the most favorable construction.
Mr. Speaker, I am commanded by His Majesty the King to declare to you that he freely confides in the duty and attachment of the House of Commons to His Majesty's person and government, and not doubting that their proceedings will be conducted with wisdom, temper, and prudence, he grants, and upon all occasions will recognize and allow their constitutional privileges. I am commanded also to assure you that the Commons shall have ready access to His Majesty upon all seasonable occasions, and that their proceedings, as well as your words and actions, will constantly receive from him the most favorable construction.
Honourable Senators, members of the House of Commons, it is with a deep sense of pride and pleasure that my wife and I join you here today as we witness Canadians coming together in a renewed sense of national pride, unity, and hope. I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. This land acknowledgement is a recognition of shared history as a nation, while continuing to deepen my own understanding. It is my great hope that in each of your communities and collectively as a country, a path is found toward truth and reconciliation in both word and deed. This is my 20th visit to Canada, spread over the course of more than half a century, and my first as sovereign. As I've said before, every time I come to Canada, a little more of Canada seeps into my bloodstream, and from there, straight to my heart. I've always had the greatest admiration for Canada's unique identity, which is recognized across the world for bravery and sacrifice in defense of national values and for the diversity and kindness of Canadians. To the First Nations, Inuit and Métis peoples, you have welcomed my family and myself to your traditional lands with great warmth and hospitality, for which I am humbly grateful. This year, we mark the 80th anniversary of VE Day and VJ Day. On Juno Beach, at Dieppe, on the Somme, at Beaumont-Hamel, at Ypres, and on Vimy Ridge. At those places and many others, forever etched into our memories, Canadians fought and died alongside our closest allies.
Today, I see representatives from every part of Canada, from St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, to Victoria, British Columbia, and Arviat in Nunavut. I see the guardians of the fundamental rights and freedoms guaranteed in the Canadian Charter. And as King, I thank you for your service to your fellow Canadians across the length and breadth of this vast and great nation.
You speak for your communities, representing an incredible richness of cultures, languages, and perspectives. We owe it to this generation and those who succeed us to think and act for the greater good of all. While the world faces unprecedented challenges, generating uncertainties across the continents with regards to peace and stability, economics and climate change, your communities have the skills and determination to bring a wealth of solutions. En encourageant la collaboration.
By fostering collaboration and engaging in respectful, constructive debates, you will ensure this government is capable of bold and fair action to support Canadians.
It has been nearly 70 years since the Sovereign first opened Parliament. In the time since, Canada has dramatically changed, repatriating its constitution, achieving full independence, and witnessing immense growth. Canada has embraced its British, French, and Indigenous roots and become a bold, ambitious, innovative country that is bilingual, truly multicultural, and committed to reconciliation. The Crown has for so long been a symbol of unity for Canada. It also represents stability and continuity from the past to the present. As it should, it stands proudly as a symbol of Canada today in all her richness and dynamism. When my dear late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, opened a new Canadian Parliament in 1957, the Second World War remained a fresh, painful memory. The Cold War was intensifying. Freedom and democracy were under threat. Canada was emerging as a growing economic power and a force for peace in the world. In the decades since, history has been punctuated by epoch-making events: the Vietnam War, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the start of the War on Terror. Today, Canada faces another critical moment. Democracy, pluralism, the rule of law, self-determination, and freedom are values which Canadians hold dear, and ones which the government is determined to protect. The system of open global trade that, while not perfect, has helped to deliver prosperity for Canadians for decades, is changing. Canada's relationships with partners are also changing.
We must be clear-eyed. The world is more dangerous and uncertain place than at any point since the Second World War. Canada is facing challenges that are unprecedented in our lifetimes.
Many Canadians are feeling anxious and worried about the drastically changing world around them. Fundamental change is always unsettling. Yet this moment is also an incredible opportunity, an opportunity for renewal, an opportunity to think big and to act bigger, an opportunity for Canada to embark on the largest transformation of its economy since the Second World War. A confident Canada which has welcomed new Canadians, including from some of the most tragic global conflict zones, can seize this opportunity by recognizing that all Canadians can give themselves far more than any foreign power on any continent can ever take away. And that by staying true to Canadian values, Canada can build new alliances and a new economy that serves all Canadians. The Prime Minister and the President of the United States, for example, have begun defining a new economic and security relationship between Canada and the United States, rooted in mutual respect and founded on common interests to deliver transformational benefits for both sovereign nations. Simultanément,
in parallel, the government is working to strengthen its relationships with reliable trading partners and allies around the world, recognizing that Canada has what the world needs and the values the world respects. Canada is ready to build a coalition of like-minded countries that share its values, that believe in international cooperation and the free and open exchange of goods, services, and ideas. In this new, fast-evolving world, Canada is ready to lead. This will be demonstrated in June when Canada convenes the G7 summit.
The government is guided by its conviction that the economy is only truly strong when it serves everyone. Many Canadians are struggling to get ahead. The government is responding, reducing middle-class taxes and saving two-income families up to $840 a year. It will cut the GST on homes at or under $1 million for first-time home buyers, delivering savings of up to $50,000. And it will lower the GST on homes between $1 million and $1.5 million. Le gouvernement.
The government will protect the programs that are already saving families thousands of dollars every year. These include childcare and pharmacare. In addition to these, the government has recently expanded the Canadian Dental Care Plan to cover about 8 million Canadians, saving the average person more than $800 annually.
The government's overarching goal, its core mission, is to build the strongest economy in the G7. That starts with creating one Canadian economy out of 13. Internal barriers to trade and labour mobility cost Canada as much as $200 billion each year. The government will introduce legislation to remove all remaining federal barriers to internal trade and labour mobility by Canada Day.
Numerous premiers have already taken vital steps to break down provincial and territorial barriers to trade. Together, we will build on that progress to deliver free trade across the nation. This is critical to unlocking Canada's full economic potential but it's not enough.
To build Canada strong, the government is working closely with provinces, territories, and Indigenous peoples to identify and catalyse projects of national significance. Projects that will connect Canada, that will deepen Canada's ties with the world, and that will create high-paying jobs for generations. Given the pace of change and the scale of opportunities, speed is of the essence. Through the creation of a new major federal project office, the time needed to approve a project will be reduced from 5 years to 2, all while upholding Canada's world-leading environmental standards and its constitutional obligations to Indigenous peoples. The government will also strike cooperation agreements with every interested province and territory within 6 months to realise its goal of one project, one review. When Canadians come together, Canada builds things that last. Éliminer ces obstacles qui freinent.
By removing these barriers that have held back our economy, we will unleash a new era of growth that will ensure we don't just survive ongoing trade wars, but emerge from them stronger than ever. It will enable Canada to become the world's leading energy superpower in both clean and conventional energy, to build an industrial strategy that will make Canada more globally competitive while fighting climate change, to build hundreds of thousands of good careers in the skilled trades, and to build Canada into the world's leading hub for science and innovation.
Critically, the government will undertake a series of measures to help double the rate of home building while creating an entirely new housing industry, using Canadian technology, Canadian skilled workers, and Canadian lumber. The government will introduce measures to deliver affordable homes by creating Build Canada Homes. This mission-driven organization will act to accelerate the development of new affordable housing. It will invest in the growth of the prefabricated and modular housing industry, and it will provide significant financing to affordable home builders. The government will make the housing market work better, including by cutting municipal development charges in half for all multi-unit housing. The government will drive supply up to bring housing costs down. To be truly strong, Canada must be secure. To that end, the government will introduce legislation to enhance security at Canada's borders. Law enforcement and intelligence agencies will have new tools to stop the flow of fentanyl and its precursors. The Canada Border Services Agency will be given new powers to examine goods destined for export, to prevent the transport of illegal and stolen products, including cars. Le gouvernement protégera.
The government will protect Canada's sovereignty by rebuilding, rearming, and reinvesting in the Canadian Armed Forces. It will boost Canada's defense industry by joining Rearm Europe to invest in transatlantic security with Canada's European partners. And it will invest to strengthen its presence in the north, as this region, which is an integral part of Canada, faces new threats.
To protect Canadians and their sovereign rights from wherever challenges may come at home or abroad. To keep communities safe, the government will hire 1,000 more RCMP personnel. It will change firearms licensing and strengthen enforcement of yellow and red flag laws. Weapons licenses for those convicted of intimate partner violence and those subject to protection orders will be revoked. Through the deployment of scanners, drones, and helicopters, additional personnel, and canine teams, the government will stem the tide of illegal guns and drugs across the border. It will take these steps while protecting the rights of law-abiding gun owners and Indigenous peoples' long-standing hunting traditions. The government will bring a renewed focus on car theft and home invasions by toughening the criminal code to make bail harder to get for repeat offenders charged with committing these crimes, along with human trafficking and drug smuggling. During this time of great change, Canadians are uniting behind what makes Canada unique. La langue française et la culture.
The French language and the Quebec culture are at the heart of the Canadian identity. They define the country that Canadians and I love so much. Canada is a country that respects and celebrates its official languages and Indigenous languages. The government is determined to protect the institutions that bring these cultures and this identity to the world, such as CBC, Radio-Canada. It will protect the people who give us access to fresh, healthy, and quality food, agricultural producers. And it will protect supply management.
Nature is core to Canada's identity. In 2022, Canada convened COP15 in Montreal, which concluded with 196 countries striking a historic agreement to protect 30% of their lands and 30% of waters by 2030. To this end, the government will protect more of Canada's nature than ever before through the creation of new national parks, national urban parks, marine protected areas, and other conservation initiatives. The government will always protect the rights and freedoms that the Charter guarantees for every Canadian. The government will be a reliable partner to Indigenous peoples, upholding its fundamental commitment to advancing reconciliation. Central to this commitment is the creation of long-term wealth and prosperity with Indigenous peoples. For that reason, the government will double the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program from $5 billion to $10 billion, enabling more Indigenous communities to become owners of major projects. As Canada moves forward with nation-building projects, the government will always be firmly guided by the principle of free, prior, and informed consent. Canada's immigration system has long been a source of pride for Canadians and of dynamism for the economy. the government is dedicated to rebuilding the trust of Canadians in immigration by restoring balance to the system. Le gouvernement instaurera.
The government will cap the total number of temporary foreign workers and international students to less than 5% of Canada's population by 2027. By doing this, the government will attract the best talent in the world to build our economy while sending a clear message to Canadians working abroad that there is no better time to come home.
Dans toutes ses actions, le gouvernement.
In all its actions, the government will be guided by a new fiscal discipline. Spend less so Canadians can invest more.
Day-to-day government spending, the government's operating budget, has been growing by 9% every year. The government will introduce measures to bring it below 2%. Transfers to provinces, territories, or individuals will be maintained. The government will balance its operating budget over the next 3 years by cutting waste, capping the public service, ending duplication, and deploying technology to improve public sector productivity. In parallel, the government will take a series of measures to catalyze new investment, to create better jobs and higher incomes for Canadians. The scale of the government's initiative will match the challenges of our times and the ambitions of Canadians. Honourable Senators, members of the House of Commons, when my dear late mother addressed your predecessors 7 decades ago, she said that in that age and against the backdrop of international affairs, no nation could live unto itself. It is a source of great pride that in the following decades, Canada has continued to set an example to the world in her conduct and values as a force for good. À vous.
I wish to express to you and to the people of Canada my heartfelt gratitude, and that of my wife, for the warmth of the welcome which we have received.
And reminds us the true North is indeed strong and free. Members of the House of Commons, you will be asked to appropriate the funds to carry out the services and expenditures authorised by Parliament. May you honour the profound trust bestowed upon you by Canadians, and may God bless and guide you in all your duties.
And with the speech from the throne read by the sovereign, the members of Parliament are heading back to the House of Commons as we continue to show you the view inside the Senate itself. And you see there King Charles remains seated, flanked by Queen Camilla to his left, and to his right, the Prime Minister, and in the foreground of your shot, the Justices of the Supreme Court. And of course, as this continues, we will have full coverage, because at this point there is a divergence in the events that will be carried out in Ottawa. As members of Parliament make their way back to the House, the business of the House picks up as Parliament is now officially opened. And as for the King and Queen, well, they will make their way in the next hour or so across the street to the National War Memorial, where they will pay respect to Canada's war veterans and to the war dead. And right now, very much still in the upper chamber. And as we continue to watch what is happening there, because at this point it is very much ceremony, much protocol that we're waiting to unfold here. I think it's worthwhile to go to Andrew Thompson. Andrew, I may interrupt you. You are at the Senate right now. Outside of where the King is. Actually, I'm going to interrupt myself. Let's just watch as His Majesty King Charles leaves the Red Chamber. And you can see His Majesty King Charles and Queen Camilla greeting members of Parliament. We saw there Ontario MP Charles Sousa now shaking the hands of the Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne behind the Protective Services there in the Senate. And as they walk out, a quick note, and there's Evan Solomon, the King, shaking his hands as he leaves. Many of the governing Liberals there to say a quick hello to the King. He is wrapping up, as we say, this quick 24-hour visit, and as he makes his way out of the Red Chamber, we'll also note the fact that the music that you hear, that is actually being provided by Morgan Grace, an 18-year-old Métis fiddler from East Selkirk, Manitoba. She played earlier in the Red Chamber as the members of the Senate and the dignitaries gathered there, including their Majesties, King Charles and Queen Camilla, awaited the members of Parliament to arrive at the Red Chamber to have the speech read. And, you know, as we watch this scene unfold, let's talk a little bit about the throne speech. Rob Bruce, I'll get you in because once the MPs return to the House, we will go back to the House. So I want to get the conversation in while we can. What stood out for you? Because clearly there were comments of sovereignty, comments of an economic plan. What stood out for you in that speech?
Well, this is one of the rare times that a Prime Minister gets to put words in the mouth of a monarch. And so every word is going to be weighed, every syllable is going to be weighed, and the syllables and words I was looking for were referring to Donald Trump's designs on Canada. And so here's what jumped out at me. All Canadians can give themselves far more than any foreign power or any continent can ever take away. That, I thought, was the clearest shot, the unmistakable message to Mr. Trump, scripted by the Prime Minister's office, which in essence said you can hobble our economy, but you cannot humble our country. I thought that's what jumped out.
Geneviève, pour vous?
Oui, la même chose pour moi. Cette affirmation
I agree.
de
That statement, that affirmation of Canadian identity and unity was very clear. Yes, there are external threats, but the focus was far more on what we can do to take responsibility and what we can do for ourselves. There was nothing particularly surprising. It was the same things that we heard during the campaign and in the mandate letter. So it was very much about how Canadians can take responsibility and prosper.
But I quickly want to go to Andrew Thompson because, Andrew, we were starting conversation a bit earlier on, right before the Sovereign left the upper chamber. And let's have a quick conversation because once he's in your hallway, I know you'll have to stop speaking. But talk to us about how the rest of this afternoon unfolds.
Yeah, in fact, lots of MPs here waiting for their chance to shake hands with the King and the Queen. After that happens, MPs, as you say, are going to head back up Wellington Street to the House chamber, and now they're going to get a chance to debate the content of what they heard in that speech from the throne. They've now heard the reason for the House of Commons being summoned to sit by the Crown, and just a bit of procedural information on what our viewers can expect to see once the House resumes sitting. A backbench member of the Liberal caucus will move a motion to formally thank the King for delivering the speech from the throne. There will be some debate today on that motion before the House adjourns for the day. And then the next day of debate on that speech, which could be tomorrow, that's called the Leaders' Day. That's where we hear from the party leaders, starting with the leader of the official opposition and then the Prime Minister. So there are several days of debate set aside for the speech from the throne. They don't necessarily have to be consecutive. There is, though, some other House business for the new House Speaker, Francis Scarpaleggia, to deal with today. He will have to oversee some routine procedural matters, including Prime Minister Mark Carney introducing his first bill. This is a traditional pro forma piece of legislation. It's called Bill C1. It's never really debated or voted on, but it essentially affirms the independence of the House of Commons to debate and vote on matters of its own choosing, not simply to rely on what's in the speech from the throne. This is a traditional symbol of the independence of the House of Commons, so you're going to see that. Also, watch for an order of supply from the government. That will allow for opposition days, which we see sprinkled throughout each parliamentary session. This is where the Conservatives and the Bloc Québécois will be able to put forward their own motions for debates and votes. Also, some other procedural questions to watch for in the House, Michael. The naming of a deputy speaker and assistant deputy speakers following yesterday's election of Francis Scarpaleggia as speaker. We're also waiting for appointments to the Board of Internal Economy. This is essentially the governing committee of the House of Commons. They handle financial and administrative matters. As well, we will wait to see committee assignments. The first committee that gets assigned are members of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. They then take on the task of forming other committees, Michael.
Okay, Andrew, thank you for that. Andrew Thompson there at the Senate, where the King is just leaving, and as we see a number of MPs still milling around hoping to get to say hello to the King and Queen. Now, from Andrew, before we go back to the conversation here, I do want to show people at home what's happening across the street from the Senate, the temporary Senate, where the throne speech was read today, because while the House of Commons will get back to business, their Majesties will be going across the street. You are seeing there the honor guard around the tomb of the unknown soldier. This is at the National War Memorial, the National Cenotaph, and this is where Their Majesties will participate in a wreath laying to pay honor to Canadian veterans and to Canada's war dead. Their last official event before being brought back to the official reception center at the Ottawa International Airport, from where they will head back to London. So all of that happening this afternoon. And let's pick up again in the conversation because, you know, once as MPs get back to the House of Commons, we will return to the House of Commons in full here on CPAC. But ahead of that, let's talk again about the throne speech that we heard there. You know, we heard a bit of what Rob's reflections were and what Geneviève had to say. For you, Catherine, what stood out for you?
Il y a des messages directs et des messages importants.
There are direct messages, important messages in this speech that go beyond the government's economic and other intentions. There was a message to Canadian francophonie across the country, French language and culture, and Quebec culture at the core of our Canadian identity.
They are getting back to the House of Commons. We will continue to watch what happens in the House of Commons right now. We'll have a bit more on the events of today a little later this afternoon. Catherine, sorry to cut you off, but Laurie, to everyone here around the table, thank you for the time today. You're watching CPAC. We'll see you again a little later this afternoon. But for now, back to the House of Commons as the mace is laid before the Speaker's chair. You're watching CPAC.
Watch it, David, you're in the way.
I know it sounds very unlikely if you know your father, but it is true. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming out. Lovely to see you. Thank you. It's not too hot out here, I hope. Good to meet you. Thank you very much. Good to see the medals there. Congratulations. You were all of you at the house. Right? You're all at the house. We've got the house here. You're going to see a lot of me. You're going to see a lot of me. It's a pleasure. Good to see you. Thank you, sir. How are the Bombers going to do?
They're going to Grey Cup.
They're going to Grey Cup? Guaranteed?
No.
that's why we play the game. Yeah. Fantastic. Lovely to see you. Great day. Great day. Great day for Library of Parliament. Okay, that's good. I don't have anything overdue yet. All good.
Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming out. Hello.
Thank you for it's a lovely day.
Pleasure. How are you?
Bringing good weather.
Very excited. Yeah. Good to meet you. Thanks for coming out. The king hasn't been by yet, right? No. Good. This is where the warm-up act. That's good. That's good. That's the way it should be. How are you? Lovely to see you. Thank you for coming.
Prime Minister, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, we got the king coming. Warming up. Pleasure. How are you? Nice to see you.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
Mr. What was it like in there?
It was very good. Very powerful. It was great to see all the representatives of Canadian institutions there, the premiers, the Supreme Court justices, representatives of Indigenous peoples. It was very powerful, very moving, very Canadian. Yeah. Oui, absolument. Il parle en français, son français est très bien. Mieux que moi, mieux que moi. C'est presque le cas pour tout le monde, c'est mieux que moi. C'est le que la mienne, il faut le dire comme ça. D'accord, merci. Pleasure. Nice to see you. Great to see you. Thank you for coming, warming up for the king. That's my job. And the queen, I should say. Boy, I've never seen so many medals. It's fantastic. You guys have done all these amazing things for Canada, haven't you? How are you? Nice to see you. God, what a great day.
Yes.
Good day. Summer begins. Summer begins. I know it's strange when you have to get the sun from England. Normally it goes the other way around.
Anytime,
We're
I'll
sending
take
the sun
it.
to them. How are you? Nice to meet you. Thank you. I'll remember that. I'll remember that. Merci beaucoup.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Pleasure. Thank you. Great. Lovely to see you. Thank you for coming up. Thank you for what did you do for the? Is that right? Believe in the actually live it. Live it. The Canadian value. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
I got the Queen's Jubilee Award.
Ah oui, moi aussi. Hein.
But I forgot. Yes.
J'en ai mon médaille.
Vous oubliez la photo.
On va le faire, mais il y a un peu de contribution. Mais la prochaine fois que la roi et la reine visitent le Canada, je vais raconter. Merci. Oh, hello. Oh, we got very official. See you soon in the house. I'll see you in the house. I'll behave. I thought the speaker was looking great. You did a very good job. Pleasure. Thanks for coming. Great. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming out. Prime Minister. Pleasure. Great to see you. God, everyone is so well dressed. We're in Ottawa. We're in Ottawa.
Occasion. For the king.
I know, it's not for the king.
We tried.
That's great. Pleasure. Good day. Good day. Thank you, sir. Hello. Nice to meet you. Good to see you.
Bonjour.
Bonjour, ça va?
Oui, ça va bien.
Oui, ça va très bien. Il fait beau.
Très beau.
Bon, la reine
soleil.
est ici. Le Canada est libre et fort.
Il fait très beau.
Absolument, c'est ça. Enchanté. Hello, how are you? Nice to see you. Welcome. Did you come from Toronto or you? You just like support. See all that? Great.
Yeah, was the first responder for the fellow that was shot.
Bienvenue. merci, monsieur. Merci, plaisir. Merci, Martin. Bonjour. Enchanté.
And you were at the World was just
Just up here to the left. Just come on the road. Just come on the road.
Just come on the road, so just mind your step.
Your Majesty's office you
Just more space. Guys, give us more space.
I don't need two cameras, I just need one.
Sorry.
Go back in
Crossing no further.
Cross on the left. Can we create some space for stills?
To the crossing. No, to the crossing and back there. Crossing just here.
Have we got a stills camera?
Guys, we're crossing here.
Have a cross, please.
No. Okay, I'm getting like rolled up here.
Yeah, just this group here, so then we're over to the memorial. Just on your right hand side.
Step behind.
I'm very glad to see the bicycle match.
Get close, keep your focus down, enjoy the moment, okay? Thanks, guys. Guys, we're good to hear. Yeah, let's just take a step back. Take a step back. No, back. You want to get a picture of it? Oh, just take a step backwards.
I want him on this side, please.
I know, but we're trying to get.
Okay, that's good. Get it out. Get it out. Back up. Get it out, and then we're all good.
Okay, guys, we're not move again. Sorry, guys. Guys, once you get close, push the buttons and enjoy the moment.
Thank you for a great job, mate.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Just take a step back so we can get a picture for us now. Jag, we're good to hear.
Because you guys preventing my stays. That's going on. I like cool. If he stays like this, it's perfect. I want him inside. Come on. Put the keeper. Just so, go back. That's it. Perfect. Thank you, guys. Okay.
Guys, you get what you need. Thanks, guys.
Tell us right away. Okay.
Put my phones away.
Thanks, guys. Enjoy the moment.
Thank you.
No, that's the live. He stays staying there. Yeah, you know where you are, so you should be next to him. Yeah, that's what I thought. All right? Thank you. We're good to hear. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the moment, guys. Guys, hope you get close. Enjoy the moment. Thanks, guys. Jack, I will point to anything. Yeah, keep going, keep going. Okay, guys. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Guys, as you get close, enjoy the moment. Thank you so much.
Young lady with the target. Guys, spray the passwords. To the side. To the side. Jack, follow me. Jack, follow me. Stopping.
Watch the step.
Yeah.
Let's get the leg in. Right there. Pull in.
Let's go. On the road, everyone, please. Sorry to grab you. Everyone, off.
Guys, if we clear the pavement, it would be even amazing. Lovely.
I'll be doing another inspection. No, just a salute. Yes.
You're right in the way.
have all those fishing nets around the tip of a screw.
Straight and narrow. Make sure he delivers all right.
Exhausted.
Yeah, we are, yes.
I will never forget our time. I'd like to
always a big weight off the shoulder.
You look tough. You look tough. I was afraid of you.
And that's sanitized.
These gentlemen are holding their salutes for you, folks, just to let you know. What's that? These gentlemen are holding their salutes for you as you walk by.
Okay. Okay, so you go here. Thank you all. Thank you again.
We'll just wait here, sir.
Yep.
Just got it.
Prime Minister, how was the visit? Prime Minister, how was the royal visit? UK television.
Very good. Very good. Successful.
Everything you wanted?
It was a very successful visit, a good reminder of the strength of, of Canadian institutions. Really, this is about Canadian institutions. The King is the King of Canada. These are all institutions from Indigenous peoples through to the Senate, the Parliament, the Supreme Court, the military represented for the Speaker of the Throne. Brilliantly delivered, I might add, by His Majesty. And you see the enthusiasm. And even for me. as much as your viewers might not, as much as your viewers might not believe it.
Has His Majesty reinforced Canada's sovereignty?
Our sovereignty is strong. Yeah, we're strong and free.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So are you flying back now?
Tomorrow, back to London.
Tomorrow?
Well, a bit of the morning.
Yes, we've got the morning.
You're going to show us
You can live the dream. You're living the dream here now. Don't get run over.
Michael!
definitely. If you come to London, then we'll give you a good tour. You can see where you are. He has other rates choices. I knew that. I thought he was on the Canadian. Bringing the ticket. I know. I did the same thing.
shot of the light.
Well, we can come back to another meeting later.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Yeah, for now, leave the outside ones. Don't worry about those for now. Because those are safe. Okay, thank you. And I know they got the risers off the road. We're just waiting for the truck for the bleachers. Awesome, thank you. Like you did. Be a photographer with my phone on. Yes.
I can give you portrait and landscape.
Tell them I'm coming.
I'm totally kidding. I'm totally kidding. I'm totally
Thank you so much. So good to see you.
We need to get
We
together.
have to, yes, that's it. And we'll have to tell Olga too?
Yeah.
We have to go, all of us have to meet up with her.
Yeah, absolutely. And even we can go and drive to Montreal one day.
Oh, that'd be fun. Ellie would be fun. Oh,
Yeah.
she'd be thrilled.
Yes, I'm like, I've been asking and I've been like,
I know.
Anyway, do you know that diplomat is back? Do you want to go party on Thursday? I'll text you.
Thursday? Yeah, I'm free Thursday. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah, no.
What? I'm free so far Thursday, yeah. So I'm all yours. Okay.
Well, that's the international airport right there. Yeah, that's the terminal right there. This is like the Canada.
We'll be in touch.
Only the important people.